Everyone, good evening, students. I welcome you to the first edition of biology class, which I will be facilitating, and I promise that it is going to be a very interesting one. Because biology itself is an interesting subject. It's very interesting, and to start with, I think I should just introduce myself. My name is Mr. Owoyomi Damilola. So feel free to call me whichever name you want, but I prefer Mr. Owoyomi. I want to assume that I'm having a kind of discussion with students who are in their secondary school years and probably preparing for any of the external examinations like WAEC, NECO, and JAM. Whichever way it is, there's no way you can escape some topics in your exams. Even the WAEC syllabus contains so many topics, and one of them is the topic we are about to pick today. Even also in the biology curriculums, this topic is the third on the list. So, and I believe this is the best place for us to start our discussion. I don't know if the student online can give us an idea of a cell. What you understand by a cell? But since we don't have enough students online present, we can continue with our class. All right. So the objective of this lesson, number one, by the end of the lesson, I'm expecting that you should be able to define a cell. List at least 3 scientists that contributed to the history of the cell, and also be able to state the cell theory. Let's get started. What is a cell? Basically, a cell can be defined as the basic, simplest, smallest structural and functional unit of life. The basic, the smallest and the simplest unit of life. As you can see here, what an examiner wants to see in the definition is that you have identified the description of a cell, which is simplest, basic, smallest, and also mentioning that it's the unit of life. Here, I also said that the cell can carry out all life activities, such as growth, respiration, and so on. Let me talk briefly on this cell. Cell is called a unit of life because all living organisms will arise from a cell. Human beings, we come from a single cell, which is the ovum or the egg of our mother. You know, during a copulation, the sperm of the male fuses with the egg of the female, and that is where life started. Meaning that as we are now, we started from a single cell. It's this single cell that gives rise to millions of cells that makes up the body today. So a cell is the simplest, smallest, basic structural and functional unit of life. Life activities. What do you mean by the life activities? Life activities basically mean that the characteristics of living things. And what are the characteristics of living things? Living things can move, living things can respire, growth, irritability or sensitivity, excretion, reproduction, competition, adaptation, and death. These are the characteristics of a living thing. A single cell is capable of exhibiting all of these characteristics because we have some organisms that comprises of only one cell, like our amoeba, our paramecium, and our chlamydomonas. All these organisms, they exist at cellular level, and they are capable of exhibiting, of carrying out all life activities. If we move forward from our definition of cell, then we can now see the history of the cell. Many years ago, some scientists have worked on cell, and this is why today we have the history of the cell. History of the cell. And what is the history of the cell? Here I said that many scientists have contributed to the history of the cell, and among the scientists, we have basically 5 of them whose research, whose work on cell has made an incredible impact and has laid the foundation of cell that we have today. The first out of them is called Robert Hooke. Robert Hooke is also called the father of cells. And why do we call Robert Hooke the father of cells? It is because Robert Hooke was the first man to work on a cell. He was the one that discovered a cell. That was in 1665. That's about 240 something years ago. That was when he discovered the cell. How did he discover the cell? He was carrying out an experiment. It came with a piece of cork. We can liken that cork to like a piece of yam of this. He started cutting the yam into pieces, into smaller pieces, until he got to a stage that he was not able to cut any further. You can imagine you having a piece of yam in your house, and you start to cut. You cut, you cut, you cut. You continue to achieve a smaller piece until you get to a stage where you are not able to cut any further. That tiny substance that you are not able to cut is what Robert Hooke likened to a cell. So that the tiniest component is what Robert Hooke named a cell. His work was indeed fantabulous, and he was named the father of cells. The next person that worked on cell was Felix Dujardin. Yes, written here, Felix Dujardin is a French biologist, and in 1835, he discovered that the cell was made up of a living component. What this means is that the cell that Robert Hooke has discovered, Felix Dujardin now patiently studied it again, and having studied it, he now discovered that the components of the cells are living, meaning that a cell is capable of performing life activities. That is the conclusion of Felix Dujardin. That was in 1835. The third person was Matthias Klebe, who is a German botanist, in 1838. Just as you probably know, a botanist is someone that studies a plant, because botany is the study of plants. So as a botanist, he studied plants. During his experiment also, he was also able to discover that that is said that a body of plants, that means all plants are made up of cells, and he described the cell as the unit of life. That was the conclusion of Klebe. So studying, being a botanist, working on plants, he discovered and contributed and concluded that all plants are made up of cells. Then the fourth person, who is Theodor Schwann. This man is another German botanist, and as a botanist, in 1839 he discovered that all the bodies of animals are also composed of cells. Schwann is a German zoologist. Zoologist is someone that studies animals, because as you probably already know that zoology is the study of animals. So this man, Schwann, was the one that discovered that all animals are made up of cells. If you can put the contribution of Hook, overtook, Scledding, and Swan together. What it means is that Hook was the one that discovered the cell. Fine. And during the experiment of Scledding, it was the one that found out that all plants are made up of cells. Then, on the other hand, Swan, who is a zoologist, now discovered that all animals are made up of cells, which means that both plants and animals are made up of cells. And the contribution of majorly these two scientists, as Scledding and Swan, led to the postulation, to the emergence of cell theory in 1839. The cell theory, we are still going to see it later in this class. So the last person is Rudolf von Virchow, also a German botanist, a German biologist. As you can see, Germans, they are really German machines because they have done extensive work on the cell in the past. So Virchow too, in 1855, he concluded in his research that cells come from pre-existing cells. As I used to tell my and Virchow, the cell you don't have. It visited so much during the course of this experiment, was now able to discover that my network is bad. Okay. It was not able to discover that new cells are not available in the market. Instead, new cells, they come from previously existing, or what we can say that new cells come from cells. If you look at this very well, it would mean that as human, when we started in our mother's womb from a single cell, other cells did not come from any other place other than the existing cell, which is the egg, or in this case, the cyst. And this of Woodruff and Virchow. All of these facts, the function, the contribution of all these 5 scientists, as I've said earlier. Here I have summarized the cell theory into just 4, and these 4 as encapsulate as combined all of the theories that has been postulated, all of the history of the cell, the rich history of the cell. So I said this is the summary of the research efforts of many scientists, like Robert Hooke. Don't forget, Robert Hooke is the father of cells, Matthias Scledding, and Theodore Swan in 1838 and 1839, and also Rudolf Virchow. The cell theory states that, number 1, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. What this space is telling us is that in as much as you are a living thing, you are composed of cell. It's either it's one cell or it is 2, or it's more than 1. So organisms with just one cell, they are called unicellular organisms. Uni means one, cellular. Unicellular organisms, they are organisms that are composed of just one cell. Then organisms that have more than one cells, they are called multicellular. Multi means more than one, then no cellular, multicellular. For unicellular organisms, you have organisms like amoeba, as I've identified earlier, like our paramecium, our Higglena, our Chlamydomonas, and so on. The organisms that have more than one cells typically We have all plants, all advanced plants, and also animals. We are all plants and animals generally. We are multicellular organisms. Then for the B, the cell is the structural and functional unit of all living organisms. What this means is that the cell is the basic organizational unit of life. It's also telling us that no life can exist outside a cell. No life can exist outside a cell. The third one is that all existing cells, they come from pre-existing cells, or simply all new cells come from old cells. So this is the third theory, the third cell theory. Then lastly, the cell theory, the fourth cell theory is that the cell contains information for a structural and functional development in its nucleic acids. And this information is passed from parents to offspring. So in short, what we are saying here is that a cell contains some special information that is saved somewhere. Here we call it the nucleic acid. And this information is responsible for the structural and functional development of the cell. That means that the cell is carrying along everywhere it is going, the cell is carrying along some information. And this information are the ones that determines the activities of the cell. It's like a car going around its engine. Of course, it is the engine that will determine the mode of operation of a car. The same time applies to the cell. Cell contains some information that is carried along anywhere it is going. And this information generally are passed from parents to offspring. In the common term, we can say that the cell contains genes. Genes. And these genes are the ones that determines the characteristic features of the offspring. That is why we say that the child resembles the father or child resembles the mother, because those informations are contained in the cell and they are passed from generation to generation. Under genetics, we are going to learn more about the concept of cell, of the function of the genes. We are going to learn more about it. So basically, this is all I've prepared for this class. Don't forget our objective for this class earlier is that at the end of the lesson, you should be able to define a cell. And after defining a cell, you should also be able to list at least 3 scientists that have contributed to the history of the cell. And similarly, you should also be able to state the just like the tip that I said. I'm not sure I'll be able to get persons to be able to evaluate the lesson. But I do hope that when you watch this video at your convenience, you'll be able to answer all of these questions. And the questions is that you should be able to define a cell. Cell is the basic, the smallest, the simplest, functional, and structural unit of life. And the cell can carry out all life activities. Like all life characteristics, a single cell can carry out all of them. And similarly here also, this is the history of the cell, containing 5 scientists that have contributed immensely to the history of the cell. And most importantly, history can never forget Robert Hooke, who is an English scientist and also called the father of cells. Of course, it was the first human being to discover the honeycomb structure of the cell in 1665. We have other scientists here and as well our cell theory. So I think that will be the end of my class for today. And we still have enough minutes which we could have used for discussion and for question and answers, which I preserve for introduction and the question and answer. So that'll be the end of the class for today. Thank you for joining. Hopefully I will see you next week Thursday where we next week Thursday we are going to also conclude our work on cell, and during that class we are going to see basically plants and animal cell, the similarities between plant and animal cell, the differences between plant and animal cells, and also the components of the component and functions of those components. I mean the components inside the cell, and their functions. Those are the three things that we are going to consider in our next class. Plant cell, differences and similarities between plant and animal cell, then the components of the cell. Thank you for joining me. Thank you very much.